Hello everyone, and welcome to today's broadcast, or interview I should say, with Professor Fändrich. Max Thomas here from Ageless Inner Health. A little bit of background: Professor Fändrich is Professor of Transplantation and Immunology. He's the Director of the Department of Applied Cellular Medicine, University of Kiel Hospital in Germany. As a Chief Scientific Officer of FMIMT. He's a Fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons in the UK and the President of the European Society of Applied Immunotherapy.
Yeah.
And I'd like to tell everybody about why you actually developed your own probiotic. What was the reason for that?
Well, first of all, I got aware of the importance of bacteria back in the years 2000, when scientists tried to decipher the human genome. And it turned out during this human genome analysis that more than 90% of genetic information in our body is of non-human origin. And it's actually that a matter of fact that we contain 10 times more bacteria than human cells. So the question came up, what does that mean? And in which way do these organisms interact with our human cells? So we actually have to consider ourselves as a holobiont, which means it's a mixture of human and non-human cells, which makes everything. And everything means everything. Your mood, your eating behavior, your digestion, your hormones, everything is related to the composition of your bacteria inside. And now the next thing was that I realized that every one of us, you and me, unless we would be identical twins, we would have a different composition of bacteria. And we now know by gene sequencing that we have more than 5,000 different strains. And it is the mother who delivers a baby who passes on her microbiome to the child. Now, that's one thing you really have to keep in mind. The second thing is that while we are running down from the mouth, the throat, the stomach, upper, middle, lower intestines, and then the large bowel, the composition of the bacteria changes. So, given these two facts, that everyone has a different microbiome, and the functions which are needed are different according to the compartment in your body, I figured, how can a simple probiotic, which contains 5 or 6 bacterial strains,
how could it fix all of these problems?
Yes. Yeah. It might be needed in one person, but not in the other. It might be needed up in the stomach, but not down there. And so that didn't make sense to me. So we have now a product with 33 different bacterial strains, which consists of aerobic and anaerobic. And we feed these bacteria with organic extracts, papaya, berries, linging, other things. And they ferment those and produce highly important antioxidants and enzymes and vitamins, natural vitamins. So it is much more than a probiotic.
One of the things that I found really interesting when I started to do the research on your product was the fact that you suspend it in a liquid, whereas some of the traditional probiotics on the market that are in capsules and freeze-dried, I mean, I've heard reports that up to 90% of the bacteria is actually dead.
I invented this bacterial spray as a spray. If you spray it in your mouth, you distribute it in the oral cavity in million times, and we have the highest density of immune cells in the oral cavity. God has given us that as a filter, because that's the first place where external things come in, right? All the toxins and so on. So the information taking place by spraying it in the oral cavity is immense and is quite different. And as I mentioned, I have to come back to this point. This product, in comparison to a probiotic, is actively sensing the composition of good and bad bacteria in various parts of your body and individually. And it will support the growth of important protective bacteria in different parts of the body in a different way. And that's not what a supplement can do.
This is what I loved about it, is it wasn't just replacing something that was already there. It's actually learning about your own unique bacteria that's,
correct,
that's unique to you.
Yes.
And the thing is that because it can then learn about that, it's going to increase all of the good bacteria and actually minimize the harm of the bad bacteria.
That's exactly true.
Yeah.
That's exactly true. And I think people who are willing to take it, they will learn that I cannot make these claims right now, but you can use it not only to protect your inner barrier, I'll come to that in a second, but you can use it for various problems you face, like a sore throat. And one other thing which is very exciting to see, a lot of people have an overgrowth of firmicutes. Firmicutes normally comprises 40–50% of bacteria in our gut, but if it overgrows, you have more than 60 up to 70%, then you cannot lose weight anymore. And that happens quite a lot of people when they age. And it especially happens in Western societies where the intake of fibers is getting less and less. And by not eating enough fibers, you narrow down the scope of the diversity in your microbiome. So then you overgrow with firmicutes. And now cows, firmicutes is the bacteria of cow, because cows, they eat just grass, and so they have to absorb any calorie they can get. And if you have too much firmicutes, you will absorb any calorie you take. You cannot lose weight anymore. So by bringing down the firmicutes, by regulating that, that's another measure how you can lose weight as well.
That makes me think then that, you know, taking the right food, of course, is very important, and getting the right nutrients, but absorbing those nutrients, it's no good just taking the food if your body can't actually absorb them. So how does the f-2M probiotic help in that regard?
Well, first of all, it produces its own natural vitamins, but secondarily, it really protects the inner lining of the mucosa of the cells inside the gut. And we have a huge variety of different functional cells, endocrine cells, neuron cells, metabolic immune cells. All these different cell types are making the inner barrier. Now what happens is that a certain class of bacteria is able to produce a mucus, which is like an inner barrier. And that protects us from bad pathogenic bacteria to enter the gut. And so there is always a balance between protective and potentially pathogenic bacteria in our body. Because to some extent we need pathogenic bacteria to kill other bacteria as well. Now what happens in modern society, and this is so intriguing if you think about it, that we are permanently exposed to toxins.
Yes, exactly, in our environment everywhere.
We have to eat and we have to breathe. Yep. And the third thing is our skin. The skin has its own microbiotic flora. Now, coming back to eating, nowadays, you know, food industry uses hormones and antibiotics to make fish and animal stock grow fast. And these antibiotics and hormones are killing specifically the protective bacteria in our gut. So over time, there's a disbalance between good and bad bacteria, I call it, and that leads to what we know and call it leaky gut.
Yes.
Leaky gut has damaged tight junctions which keep the inner barrier together, and these nanopores allow these toxins to enter the gut and to permanently activate immune cells, which causes big inflammation, and secondarily to migrate via the axis from the gut to the brain. And that's why I'm convinced we see such a huge increase in neurodegenerative diseases, like Parkinson,
Alzheimer's, dementia, etc.
Dementia, ALS, and so on.
Yeah.
And in this sense, it is extremely important to rebalance and restore the inner integrity of your gut wall barrier, and this is what the spray actually can do. And that's, in that sense, it's a very preventive.
I was just going to say, it's kind of like preventing getting these chronic illnesses that are caused by your gut microbiome not being healthy.
We have evidence from preclinical experiments we did in inflammatory bowel disease, where you have a leaky gut, that this product can support the repair of the inner barrier, and as it supports the formation of small chain fatty acids, it triggers an immune reaction which is immune regulatory, and that brings down the inflammation. So in that sense, it can actually cure even severe cases of inflammatory bowel disease and leaky gut. And there is a huge scope of different publications which address the impact of the bacteria on neurotransmitters in the brain. Well, there are neuroendocrine cells which have a direct connection with the autonomic nerve system, and good bacteria release compounds and molecules which trigger the activation of these cells, and that changes the neurotransmitters in the brain. And so it has been published, that's a huge panel of different publications showing that depending on the composition of your microbiome in the gut, you can be happy
or sad,
or you have anxiety, or you have depression. So it's a mood swinger actually. And with good bacteria, you feel happy. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And I fully agree to you. It's the moment you prevent chronic disease, you postpone aging. And you might even think about reversing aging. Yeah.
It's been so incredible today to talk to you about things, you know, like I'm passionate about this because I've used it myself. I can see all of the benefits.
Well, Max, thank you very much for giving me the chance to explain these things. And for me, my major effort is that people understand that they can prevent chronic disease by doing very little, just by helping their own microbiome to stay healthy.
Yeah.
And that's all I want to do.
Well, it's wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. Well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.